All quarterbacks, all the time. Coming up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 3rd, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show grows each and every day. That's because of you and because of my man, Ari. Ari does a fantastic job each and every day, making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, we're sounding good, takes a lot of pride in his work, and we appreciate that. You can hit him up on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And of course, you want to chime in on the show, as many of you do. We got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Coming up on the show today, in segment number 3, we will get your calls and texts. We got plenty of them, right? And it's funny, the whole show is really going to be quarterbacks, and more quarterbacks. But in segment number 3, a lot of conversation, calls and texts about quarterbacks, and then also position battles for training camp coming up at the end of the month. Veterans on the 23rd, the rookies on the 21st of July in Costa Mesa, Southern California. I'll tell you a lot more about training camp later on in segment number 1, but quarterbacks and position battles is what we're talking in segment number 3 with calls and texts. Segment number 2, a very passionate call about a veteran quarterback that is in the league that could potentially be the Raiders quarterback and why it wouldn't be such a bad idea. Very, very passionate call. I had no idea it was going to be rolling through, but it did. So definitely want to dedicate some time to that call. That'll come up in segment number 2 of today's show. Here in segment number 1, news and notes. And oh, surprise, surprise, has to do with quarterbacks. I'll explain what that means after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Now, the funny thing about it, none of this came to be because I wanted to talk about the quarterbacks, right? I mean, we know what the big elephant in the room is when it comes to the silver and black, and we talked about it till we're blue in the face, right? We get it. We talked about position battles on yesterday's show, that there's going to be a quarterback competition in training camp between Aidan O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. So I'm cool with that. Like, I'm good with that. I understand that there's not going to be any changes at that position this year. The Raiders have a team that I think is going to be a hell of a team. Surprise some folks that, you know, are just kind of thinking that the Raiders are going to be terrible, right? I mean, we've talked about that a lot as well, that the defense is going to be who the defense is, and if Luke Getsy and company can figure out something on offense, they could be a really good team. So I'm cool with that. I get it. That's what this year is going to be. So as I was doing my radio show on Tuesday on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness, I was doing it live from Studio Q, where I'm at right now, right, sitting in the home studio, and just out of nowhere, we're having conversation about, and I can't even remember what the conversation was about, but randomly I look up at the TV screen, and it's funny, I see Matt Miller from ESPN on TV talking about a 2025 NFL mock draft. And Raider Nation, anyone who has listened to me for any amount of time knows I'm not already worried about the draft in July, early July. I'm not worried about the draft at that stage of the game. Matter of fact, the later in the year it goes where I don't have to talk about the draft, the better, right? And I know that we've had conversations, and I had a guest on the show talking about what quarterbacks should we be on the lookout for and be listening for and paying attention to that are going to be playing college ball this upcoming year to prepare ourselves just in case the Raiders don't have their quarterback position, but solidified. But it's funny, as I looked up at the TV and saw Matt Miller, good friend of the show, saw him on TV going through his mock draft, his very early 2025 mock draft, I thought, whoa. And it was crazy because at the time, what caught my attention was the fact he was talking about the Raiders, and he had them picking number 2 overall. Now, don't worry. He had them picking number 2 overall because they traded up with the Carolina Panthers, and they made a pick. But I don't know because I didn't get to hear the segment. I was on the radio. I just had it on mute, but I was able to see it. I don't know where he had them at, like where he thought their season was going to end, but clearly he didn't think they were in position to go get one of the top quarterbacks in 2025. So he had them trading up to the number 2 spot to go get a quarterback. And so let me go over it real quick. And again, this just happened to come out of nowhere. I was not thinking about talking about this, and it was so funny, even on my radio show, I just, in the middle of whatever conversation I was having, I was like, oh, whoa, hey, look what just popped up on TV, and I started talking about it. it. But Matt Miller's way too early 2025 mock draft, he has quarterback Carson Beck going number 1 overall out of Georgia to the Giants. I mentioned number 2. He had the Raiders trading up to number 2 spot with the Carolina Panthers to go and get Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders. Cornerback Will Johnson from Michigan went number 3 to the Broncos. Edge rusher from Tennessee, James Pierce Jr., went number 4 to Tennessee. Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, the offensive lineman, the big tackle, went to Washington at 5. LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell went number 6 to the Patriots. Defensive lineman Michigan Mason Graham went number 7 to the Minnesota Vikings. At number 8, wide receiver Luther Burden III, Missouri, to the Carolina Panthers. So I guess the Raiders traded at that number 8 spot right there because, again, they switched with Carolina to move up to number 2. So apparently he had them trading up from 8 to number 2. So there's that. And then number 9, wide receiver cornerback Travis Hunter from Colorado went to the Cardinals. And Quinn Ewers, the quarterback out of Texas, went number 10 overall to the Saints. So there you go. So there was 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks in the top 10 according to Matt Miller in his way too early 2025 mock draft. And that's fine, right? I know Shedeur Sanders is a big name, and obviously he's primetime, Coach Deion Sanders' son. We get that. Colorado was a team that made a lot of noise early in the season last year. We'll see what they did this year. They obviously have to get way better protection for him. And as I mentioned on my radio show when I saw that, and they were talking about Shedeur Sanders, I don't have a problem, and I'm not writing him off and saying that he's not going to be a good quarterback, but I think he's got a lot of work to do this year to prove that he's going to be that guy in the NFL. And the only other question I have, and I don't have any idea to the answer to this, and none of us will until he makes it to the league and we actually get to see it for our own eyes. I don't know how hands-on Coach Sanders is going to be. His dad, Deion Sanders, I don't know how hands-on he's going to be once he gets to the league. We've already heard that he doesn't want his son to go play in cold weather cities. He doesn't want Travis Hunter, who he considers basically his son as well, he doesn't want him to go to a cold weather city either. So he's already kind of dictating, where they'll go or select teams that they'll go to. You saw what happened last year when he said, no, Shedeur's not going to the draft. He's going to actually end up going number 1 overall. So he's not going, he's not going to be number 2 to anybody. So that was already a little hands-on, but who knows? Maybe he gets to the league, passes him off to a coach, and so be it, right? He watches from a distance. I don't know. I think there's a lot to like about Shedeur Sanders. I know that this upcoming season for college football, they're in the Big 12 this year as Colorado. I'll be paying attention to how quickly he can get the ball out of his hands, how effective he can be, right? Is he willing to scramble and pick up some yards and not take as many sacks? But again, a lot of those sacks he took in 2023 were because he held on to the ball for a long time and they had no protection at Colorado. So how much better and how much more improved will he be? But I just found that to be pretty interesting, especially because the Raiders haven't even got to training camp. No team's got to training camp yet, and we're already talking about the mock draft in 2025. But again, as I had an interview, had a guy who covers college football like a glove on the show just to talk about some quarterbacks, that's given Matt Miller's early thoughts on, even if the teams are wrong, where he believes the quarterbacks will go. So he's looking at Carson Beck, Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, and Quinn Ewers out of Texas, the top 3 quarterbacks out of the top 10. Those will be 3 quarterbacks he thinks will go in the top 10 of the NFL draft, which I, again, find pretty interesting and was totally unexpected. But it's funny because it kind of led to what's happening on the show today, where we're talking a lot of quarterbacks. That, again, was a totally unexpected conversation here for the Locked On Raiders podcast. Now, I mentioned training camp. And I mentioned Costa Mesa. And once the Raiders get to training camp, the 21st and the 23rd, and they're there for a few weeks before they break camp and head to Minnesota to go for their first preseason game, you're not actually going to hear Costa Mesa, the name Costa Mesa, mentioned too many times. Matter of fact, after this show, you probably won't hear me mention that name, Costa Mesa, too many more times. Why is that? Funny, you ask. I'm glad that you did. I'm here to tell you. I was actually at a meeting at the Raiders facility on Tuesday talking about training camp and found out, and we've talked about this before, that is the Chargers' home territory. That is the Rams' home territory. And there's actually rules as we're down there and we're broadcasting. We can't say, hey, we're here in this city having a good time, the weather's beautiful, this, that, and the other. There's actually rules to that the NFL has sent over to the Raiders. So we've got to be very selective with the words that we use. And I know everyone's not going to understand that. I know everyone's not going to follow those rules, but that's what we have been told. And I haven't got the exact rules, like the actual email from the NFL. I haven't got it in my email yet, but that is something that to me I find intriguing. Like, wow, they are so protective of their area and their fan base, and the Raiders, kind of infiltrating their area, their words, not mine, that they don't even want it to be broadcast where they're broadcasting from and they're training at, even though everyone knows it's Costa Mesa. So I found that to be very interesting. Again, when I get the actual real rules, and believe me, I know you might think I'm exaggerating, that there's rules to what we can and can't say about where the Raiders are holding their training camp. When I get it, I'll read it to you, just so you know that I'm not making this stuff up. This is real. I couldn't even make this stuff. I'm a creative dude. I think I'm pretty stinking creative. Even I couldn't have made that up. But that is something that we will be following at the end of the month when we're at Raiders training camp in that place. It's just that simple. So could the Raiders break the bank for a veteran quarterback if he becomes available? You'll hear a very passionate call from a Locked On Raider podcast listener that thinks it would not be a bad idea, and he's very passionate about it. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. They've got great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. And believe it or not, I know we haven't talked about baseball a lot. We're almost at the All-Star break. The All-Star game is taking place in Texas at the Rangers Stadium, and they're in Arlington. Maybe you want to go to the All-Star game. Guess who can get you there? Guess how you can get there? Game Time. Use the Game Time app. They got great last-minute deals. They've got zone deals, all-in prices. You can see views from your seat so you know what you're looking at. You know what you're getting before you even buy them. And they have the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is always covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Right now, what do you need to do if you're going to go to the All-Star game or any other game? You need to take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your purchase, your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, continuing with quarterback conversation. This wasn't planned. It wasn't something I had in my mind. I was like, man, I'm going to bring this to the table. But sometimes that's just how things play out. Sometimes it's just one of those where it happens. It's right in front of you. You just got to roll with it. So that's what we're doing here on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. We talked about quarterbacks that will be available by way of the draft in 2025, courtesy of Matt Miller from ESPN, his very early mock draft. We did that in segment number 1. Now, here in segment number 2, I want you to hear from our guy, Jacob in Hanford. He's a longtime listener to the show, longtime caller, texter, whatever the case may be. I've actually met him here in Vegas, a really good dude. He's calling to talk about the current Cowboys quarterback, Dak Prescott, and that's a quarterback that we've actually had a conversation about here on the show. I'm not too sure how this conversation came back up or how this name popped back up for Jacob, but it did. He's very passionate about one Dak Prescott, and he'll tell you why. Check it out. Here's Jacob in Hanford.
What's up, Q? This is Jacob from Hanford. I want to be kind of quick. It's about the whole Dak Prescott thing, and I know we got Aidan O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, and we're hoping for the best with those guys. Either one of those guys succeeds, I'll be the happiest camper in Raider Nation. That being said, the disrespect for Dak Prescott, man. I know we're Raiders fans. We're, for some reason, not supposed to like the Cowboys almost as much as we dislike the Chiefs. I don't get it, but I get it at the same time. I understand that's how Raider Nation feels. Dak Prescott, by all accounts, if we went off of every other kind of year, should have won MVP last year based on statistics alone. Now, I know once he got to the playoffs, it was just a big, ugly mess. But the guy is a solid quarterback. He should be held within the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. In my opinion, that means he's elite. I don't know if that means he definitely doesn't mean he's a generational talent. He doesn't have some rocket quarterback Patrick Mahomes' arm. It doesn't mean that he can run like Lamar Jackson, but he's got a little bit of everything in his toolbox. You know, that guy can do a lot of different things. He can throw it, he can run it, and I mean, he's more of a runner. He's a pocket guy at this point in his career, but the guy is a good quarterback. If we wound up with him next year, I would not be upset. I would not be thinking, oh, we're going to be a great team and then we're going to flub in the playoffs. No, I don't think that's what's going to happen. If we get a guy like Dak Prescott, that might be the best thing that ever happened to us. So let's be happy with Aidan. Let's be happy with Gardner. Let's hope for the best. But if it goes south real quick, I might have the Cowboys on speed dial. I would love to have Dak Prescott in the organization. All right, Q. Appreciate everything you do. You take it easy. Go Raiders.
There he is. That's Jacob and Hanford right there talking about Dak Prescott. And it's funny, man. He did have a really good season last year. Like, I don't have a problem with the Cowboys. I say it all the time. I was in Central Texas for a very long time, working at ESPN Central Texas. I covered the Cowboys. I learned to cover NFL teams by covering the Cowboys, right? That's how I learned to do what I do now, is by coverage of that team. I don't have a problem with them. I don't have a problem with Dak. Right? I know when they drafted him in the 4th round, they used a compensatory pick, and that was like their option 3 or 4 when it came to quarterbacks. I thought, yeah, he's not going to be anything. They wanted Paxton Lynch. They wanted, who was the Connor Cook, who the Raiders ended up going getting when they leapfrogged them to go get him. They wanted him, and they ended up with Dak Prescott. And guess what? Ended up being the best quarterback out of all those guys. So I don't have a problem with Dak. I don't think he's elite. That's just my personal feeling, but it depends on what you feel like the definition of elite is. You talked about top 10. I talk about top 5 when I talk about elite. I think elite is a word that should be reserved for the very special of the very special. Like, everyone in the league is really good. They're not in the league if they're not really good, right? But top 10, I feel like there's a lot of quarterbacks that, you know, not consistently each and every year will be a top 10 quarterback, but we'll have years we're in the top 10. So I look at elite. When I talk about elite, I'm talking about top 5, right? Maybe even top 3. And Patrick Mahomes is definitely number 1, right? But I think you can look at a guy like Josh Allen and say, okay, he's an elite quarterback, right? I think you can look at Lamar Jackson and say he's right on the cusp of being an elite quarterback. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers for many years was an elite quarterback, right? I mean, there's certain guys that you could look at and say, Tom Brady, I don't have to, you know, there's certain guys you don't have to mention that are elite quarterbacks, but there's not very many of them. That's why they're elite. So I mean, again, and it really depends on the definition of that word. However you're saying it, if elite is top 10 to you, then I guess Dak Prescott is elite. Now, this is what my issue is. It's not that, again, like, I don't like him. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I do think he's a good quarterback. I just think that $60 million a year, which is what it's going to cost to get him, regardless who signs him to a contract extension, whether it's the Cowboys or any other team, it could be the Raiders, could be any other team in the league that needs a quarterback. I just think $60 million is a ton of money. And I understand the fact that TV rights keep going up. I understand gambling money comes into effect. I understand that there's a lot of different money. Salary cap keeps going up and up and up. Like, I get all that. And probably 3 years from now, we'll look at it and say $60 million a year is not really that much money for a quarterback, which sounds silly to say that, but I'm sure that's what's going to probably happen, right? There was a time in the league where Derek Carr, for a quick minute, was the highest paid quarterback. And I remember everyone saying, that's a lot of money. And I remember myself coming on this very show saying, yeah, but in a couple of years, that's not even going to be a lot of money. And then I believe Matt Stafford topped him, and that was over at that point, right? And so, I mean, it just continues to evolve, right? There was a time when Patrick Mahomes was, you know, a $40 million man, and that was a ton of money and can't believe it. And now that looks like not chump change, but that looks very reasonable, right? I mean, Jared Goff just got $53 million. Trevor Lawrence just got $55 million a year. So, yeah, Dak Prescott's going to get $60 million a year from somebody. Again, that's just my hang up with him, is that, yeah, he could be a very good vet quarterback. And if you were going to make a move like that for a guy like him, if you feel like Minshew and O'Connell don't cut it after what you see this year, and for some dumb reason the Cowboys don't re-sign Dak, I could see it working, because I think the Raiders have really good weapons on offense. It's just for me, and this is just me in particular, and clearly it's not for you. $60 million a year seems like a lot of money if you're not getting, in my opinion, an elite quarterback. But again, maybe you feel like you are getting an elite quarterback. Last season, Dak's numbers, 4,516 yards through 36 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. That's pretty stinking good, right? But I remember the year before that, he wasn't that good, right? And had double-digit interceptions and was talking about, I'm not going to throw double-digit interceptions. And to his credit, he didn't, right? 36 touchdowns, 9 interceptions is a really good season. It is. I just, again, look at Dak and say, I don't consider him an elite guy. For his career, he's just under 30,000 yards. He has 202 career touchdowns, 74 interceptions. Again, really good numbers. For me and my money, I think it's not my money, so it doesn't really matter. The tough pill for me to swallow is the $60 million a year. That's all it is. So if I can, I guess, get over the hump of the Raiders, who, again, the money's not mine, so it really shouldn't matter, having to pay that kind of money, so be it. I also look at the roster and say, I love what they're doing on defense. I know that Malcolm Kuntz is going to have to get paid at some point. Tyree Wilson, is on a rookie deal. He's only in year 2, so that's good. But you've got guys that are, on their last year of their deal, like a Nate Hobbs. Got a guy like Jack Jones that's going to be needing some money in a couple of years. There's other players that you want to make sure you keep in the mix. Max Crosby's only under contract for a couple more years. So there's guys like that I look at. Trayvon Merrick potentially could be a guy that they bring back. Maybe a Spillane, maybe a Diablo. Like there's like a handful of guys on defense that are in the last year of their deal that they could be making some decisions on. And it just feels like $60 million a year for a quarterback, and you can only imagine what that fully guaranteed money is going to look like, right? It just seems like you're going to hurt yourself somewhere. And I fully believe that you hold on to the players that you want to hold on to, but depth is always going to take a hit as well. So I'm not mad at the call at all. I love the passion, as a matter of fact. And, it very well easily could end up being a conversation that we look back and have after this season. Or maybe halfway through the season, if things ain't going right, maybe it's like, well, maybe the Raiders should be thinking about a guy like Dak Prescott. At the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter, to be 100% honest, because I don't think the Cowboys are crazy enough not to re-sign him. I think Jerry Jones is dragging his feet because that's what Jerry Jones does. He wants a look at me now moment, and that look at me now moment will probably come when they're in Oxnard, California, and they're at training camp. And he goes and he's at the tennis courts there at the Marriott, and he has his State of the Cowboys Union, and he says, that Dak, I remember when we drafted him back in the 4th round. He was a compensatory pick, and now he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And he is my guy to lead the troops for America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. I know, not a very good Jerry Jones impersonation, but that's what I got for you. So that's what I think is going to ultimately happen. You'll hear a speech like that, something like that, and it'll probably be, Johnny Walker Blue, fueled, because Jerry loves him some Johnny Walker Blue. But I don't think Dak's leaving Dallas at all. I just think that at some point they're going to come together, they'll have their kumbaya moment, and they'll get a deal done. Because if not, you've got who? Trey Lance, you got Cooper Rush. No thanks. It's best to go ahead and make sure they take care of that guy named Dak. But Jacob, fantastic call, man. Love the passion. Definitely appreciate it. That does not stop with the quarterback conversation. Your calls, your texts, they're coming up next. We've got camp position battles, and we've got quarterback competition. We'll do that and talk about that in segment number 3 with your calls and texts here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast. Voicemail line 707-654-4693. Got a text from Just Win Will out the 816. He's talking about training camp battles. He says, hey, Q, Just Win Will at the 816. The camp battle that you left off is the battle for who our kick returner will be, or the special teams returner in general. I'm glad you and your wife had a safe and well-deserved vacation. Now back to the grind, my guy. LOL. LOL. Thanks, Q, for everything you do for the nation. Just Win Will out, Raiders. And thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at the kick returner, who's going to be that guy. I think that Dylan Lobby is going to have a major role there. I think Trey Tucker has an opportunity to have a major role there. There's dudes that, and I guess you could look at that as competition, but there's some guys that I think are going to have some real good shots at being that guy. And, DJ Turner, the speedy wide receiver who was a good special teams ace last season, I think he's going to have an opportunity in mandatory minicamp and OTAs. We saw, Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs having an opportunity to get their hands on the ball, but I think that's just them getting some reps. But for the most part, I look at Dylan Lobby, I look at Trey Tucker, and then I look at who did I just say? Like a DJ Turner as guys that probably will be, probably the predominant dudes when it comes to the kick return. But that's valid. I'll give you that one. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. And yeah, vacation was much needed and much appreciated. So thanks so much, Just Win Will. Do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Zulu. I said that there was quarterback conversations, right? He's calling to talk about Aidan O'Connell and Patrick Mahomes in the same call and has some numbers that he wants to bring to the table. Raider Zulu breaking it down here. Here he is. Check it out.
Hey, Q. It's Raider Zulu. I know the thing is that Aidan's the worst quarterback in the league and Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. But I would just like to read these numbers over Aidan and Pat O'Connell's last 9 games, or Aidan's career and Pat's 9 last games of his season. So Aidan O'Connell had 11 touchdowns. Pat Mahomes had 12. Aidan had 5 interceptions. Pat Mahomes had 8. Aidan O'Connell, 17 sacks. Pat Mahomes, 20. Aidan O'Connell, 1 fumble. Patrick Mahomes, 4. Record, 5-4. Aidan O'Connell, record 5-4 for Patrick Mahomes. So with those numbers, I'm wondering why Aidan really gets any credit. What do you think? All right, thank you. Go Raiders.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And Aidan O'Connell is not going to get the same love as Patrick Mahomes anytime soon, right? And he doesn't deserve the same love anytime soon. I understand the numbers that you rattled off, and I say it all the times. You can dress numbers up to really tell whatever story you want, but bottom line, Aidan O'Connell is a very small sample size compared to what Patrick Mahomes has done, a multiple-time Super Bowl champ, a multiple-time Super Bowl MVP, a guy that could put a team on his back, a guy that, every team in the league is trying to find their Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, he's really helped change the quarterback position because everyone's looking for that guy. Every year that he's on the field, the Chiefs are a Super Bowl contender. It's just that simple, right? Aidan O'Connell, it's not even fair to him to put him in that conversation. He literally had 1 year under his belt. He only has not even a full 17 games as far as a starter. He's only named the starter after November 1st when Antonio Pierce took over as the head coach and really got a lot better down the stretch. Really the last, 5 games where he wasn't turning the ball over. He looked a lot better, but now he's not going to get that kind of conversation. Now, if Aidan O'Connell has a fantastic this year, and the Raiders get 10, 11 wins, they make it to the playoffs, they're competing for the AFC West, and he's proven that he's the franchise guy. Okay, now go do it again. Now go do it again, right? You do it multiple times, and then all of a sudden you're in the conversation of, hey, this is a quarterback that can get it done. Or go put up some huge, monstrous numbers, throwing the ball over the yard, get Devontae 1,200 yards, get Jacoby 1,000 yards, right? Get Brock Bowers involved, throw 35, 36 touchdowns, only have under 10 interceptions, right? And then maybe you could be in that conversation. And guess what? Dak Prescott's not even in that conversation. I just gave you his numbers from 2023. He's not even in the Patrick Mahomes conversation. So as much as I understand and I respect the numbers, and again, I feel like you can dress up numbers to tell any story you want. And I say that because I used to do sales. And that's the key to sales, is making your numbers look the way that you need your numbers to look to tell your story and to get your sale. So not saying that that's what you're doing, but the numbers right now you can't have with Patrick Mahomes and Aidan O'Connell. They're not in the same category right now. One's on the apple tree and one's on the orange tree. But thanks for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Stanton right here in Vegas. It says, hey, Q, Stanton from Vegas. I think you missed one key position battle. Malcolm Kuntz versus Tyree Wilson. In my opinion, Tyree could and maybe should, with his draft capital, push Kuntz to the bench as a pass rush specialist. That could be a battle to watch if Tyree makes a leap to the superstar he could be. That's Stanton in Vegas, and thanks for the text. I appreciate you, and I didn't miss that and I didn't bring that up because I don't think that that's a reality. I think Malcolm Kuntz has already solidified himself as a starter, having 8 sacks and 3 forced fumbles from November 1st through the rest of the season like he did in 2023. I think he's already earned that. I actually have Tyree Wilson as as number 2 on the depth chart coming off, at the beginning of the season. Now, at some point, maybe he earns that spot, but I think Malcolm Kuntz, and maybe you're right? Maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe that is going to be a camp battle, and one will be, a depth, one will be on the second string, and one will be the starter. But I think that Malcolm Kuntz has kind of solidified himself. I look at it as Max Crosby, obviously, Christian Wilkins. You're looking at John Jenkins, Adam Butler, whatever combination you want to put there, and then Malcolm Kuntz. And Tyree could be in there if you're not going to have Butler or Jenkins in there. He could also be added in there in like the NASCAR package, but I don't see that as a competition. I understand where you're coming from, and obviously with Tyree being drafted number 7 overall, you would think that he's being a starter, but with this being his first full offseason where he's healthy, I think that there's no rush to get him out there, especially when you got bloodthirsty Pirates like the guys I just rattled off, the names I just rattled off, that are ready to step up and take that role right now. But that's just me. You could end up being right. Also, Malcolm Kuntz is in a contract year, and I think he's going to want to be in a contract year, if you know what I mean. He's going to want to ball out in that contract year. Thanks for the text, though. Fantastic stuff. Up next, got a call from CB from the 925. He's calling to talk about Raider Nation being used to chaos and the fact that he's feeling everyone is looking for it. And he explains what he means by that. Here he is, CB from the 925.
Hey, what up, Q? This is CB from the 925. Just a couple things I want to talk about. I love the show, man. One thing I want to say is I feel like everybody's jumping the gun. As Raider fans, we're so used to the chaos. We're so used to some kind of drama that like we're reaching for it. We're trying to find chaos. We're jumping the gun way too fast about this quarterback situation and about the offense in general. We're doing the biggest 180 shift that any offensive scheme could ever do. We're going from Josh McDaniels, Earnhardt Perkins model of power gap blocking to a total West Coast wide zone. I mean, James Craig said it himself. He's coming from San Francisco. These guys are great power blockers, but, the zone scheme, it's going to take a while. I mean, I can't believe that we're just totally panicking. It's like, come on, guys. Just chill out. Let them do their thing. AP's got the team under wraps. Let's just sit back and chill out. As Raider fans, stop trying to find the chaos. That's all I'm saying. All right, Q, I love you, bro. You have a great day. Raiders.
CB, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. I like your approach. Just wait and see, right? See how it plays out. The good thing is this team knows what they have more than we do, right? Those coaching staff, those guys that I'm very comfortable with. I think that those coaches on this staff are going to be really good coaches. I like the makeup of what AP was able to do as far as hire those guys. I think that they got a lot of really good coaches on the staff. They do have to figure out a new scheme. They do have a quarterback competition. We know, obviously, we've talked about it. But the best thing about that quarterback competition, I feel like, is that they have weapons. They do have a team that is not, talent void. On offense, they've got a lot of weapons. It's almost like what Caleb Williams has in Chicago. He's a rookie quarterback walking into a good situation with a lot of weapons around him. The Raiders have a lot of weapons as well. They just got a second-year guy in Aidan O'Connell and obviously a journeyman quarterback in Gardner Minshew as well. One of those guys is going to be the starting quarterback, but they have quality dudes to get the ball to. Devontae, Jacoby, Brock, Michael, right? Trey. They got Zamir White, Alexander Madison to run the ball. I mean, they've got weapons. They've just got to put it all together. Thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a text from George, the Jack Tatum Raider in the STL, talking about position battles. Says, Q, I see two, and he spelled it Q-U-E like gay, like we're speaking Spanish, but that's cool. I got you. He says, Q, I see two position battles on defense. The rookie linebacker should beat out Diablo or Masterson. Therefore, those two will be fighting each other for the third linebacker on the field. Also, the other corner is wide open. Third position fight on defense is for next year. Trayvon Merrick is fighting for next year. This year, he gets the win at strong safety. It's up to the rookie, Trey Taylor, if Merrick gets a new contract. So let's watch his training camp. On offense, of course, quarterback, Glaze, the right tackle rookie, has to beat out the starter, Munford. 12 personnel is a power running formation and a passing novelty. In reality, the tight end position is Bowers to take. Mayer will probably be on the trading block. Georgia Jack Tatum Raider in the STL. Thanks for the text. And I'll kind of start at the bottom and work my way back up the text. I'll start with the 12 personnel and Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, and I don't think either one of those guys is on the move. I just don't. I think that they're going to try to reinvent what Gronk and Aaron Hernandez had going on in New England, right? That was a great 1-2 punch with those two tight ends, and they have the opportunity to do that because they're two different type of guys. They're not the same guy. If they were the same similar tight end, I'd say, yeah, you're right. But these two dudes are different, right? Bowers is a guy who's going to probably line up in the slot quite a bit, right, and get the ball to him many different ways. And Michael Mayer is going to be more of a traditional tight end where he's going to get more blocking in, do a little bit more of the grimy work. I don't see either one of those guys going anywhere anytime soon. Obviously, Bowers just drafted, so you know that's not going to happen. Glaze trying to battle out with Thayer Munford. I think Glaze is a swing tackle at the best, and he really might kick inside to the guard's position, right? I don't think that he's going to be ready to be a starter anytime soon. I think that he's got a lot of developing to do, and the Raiders really like Thayer Munford, so that's why I didn't put Glaze in there as a battle. But I did say Munford against somebody. We'll just see who it is. Maybe it's Glaze, maybe it's Dalton Wagner, but Munford will probably have some kind of competition. I just don't know how much it really is. As far as fighting for next year, I'm not really worried about that. I'm talking about the starters this year: Trayvon Merrick and Malcolm. Not Malcolm Epps. That's Epps. What's Epps' first name? Marcus Epps. Jeez, I'm thinking of Malcolm Kuntz and Marcus Epps. I'm trying to combine the two. I'm making my own player. It's like Madden. It's like when you create your own player. Malcolm Epps. No, it's Marcus Epps. So, yeah, I think Epps and Merrick are going to be the starters. Trey Taylor is going to have his opportunity, but he's also going to be a guy that's going to get his first bite at the apple by way of special teams. So I don't really see that. And, again, like I said, I'm not really worried about Merrick and his contract during the year. He'll work that out. He'll figure that out. The other corner wide open. Yeah, we talked about that. That was a position I mentioned. Jack Jones, Nate Hobbs. The other position is definitely corner. And as far as linebacker, it's going to be Spillane and Diablo will be the two linebackers on the field most of the time. Masterson comes in when they have three linebackers on the field. And I think that, their rookie that they drafted out of Ohio State, as much as I like him and think that there's a possibility that he can be a player, I don't think he's going to be a player right now, right? He's a fifth-round pick out of Ohio State. I think he'll be a guy that also kind of, gets his first bite at the apple by way of special teams, and he'll work himself onto the field. What will be interesting is if the Raiders extend Spillane or not. If they don't extend Spillane, then that's when you can slide in your rookie out of Ohio State in the fifth round, right? That's where that guy could come in because he's very Robert Spillane-like. So I don't think that he's ready to take over until maybe next year. So that's why I didn't put those battles that you're talking about for camp. So, I mean, if you're looking at those and those are your storylines, maybe so. I just didn't see it that way. But again, that was just me. Fantastic stuff, man. Thanks so much for the text, and thanks so much for all the feedback on the show. Some really good stuff at 707-654-4693. You can chime in on any of the subjects, from what Matt Miller had to say as far as the 2025 NFL draft and the Raiders trading up from number 8 to number 2 to go get Shedeur Sanders, to what Jacob and Hanford had to say about Dak Prescott, and he wouldn't be upset if he was the quarterback in 2025 if O'Connell or Minshew didn't prove to be the guy, and the rest of the feedback that we've had from position battles to quarterbacks as well. 707-654-4693. Coming up tomorrow, every year I have the conversation with John Kingdon that I did, who did the story on Al Davis. Since the 4th of July is not only the country's birthday, but it's Al Davis's birthday. So traditionally here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, I'd like to always bring that conversation each and every year to the podcast, as a lot of people will be off work. They'll be able to celebrate the Independence Day with their family and friends around the house and at barbecues. So that could be the conversation that you listen to coming up on Thursday. But there will be that show, as I do it each and every year here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.